had been paid off, and property taxes weren't an issue with her pension and James's life insurance. But the land had become valuable, and developers were circling. David had known this, of course. He'd been the one to broker the sale, though he'd recused himself officially due to conflict of interest. Mary places her empty teacup in the sink, her reflection distorted in its ceramic curve. The woman looking back at her seems impossibly old, though she feels in her mind like the same person who once danced in that living room with 3 small children clinging to her legs. The phone sits silent on its cradle. She'd given up her cell phone plan last year, another unnecessary expense according to the financial advisor Michael had hired to help manage her affairs. Her landline remains only because it came bundled with the basic cable she allows herself. The last time all 3 children were in the same room with her was at the closing of the house sale. They'd taken her to lunch afterward at an expensive restaurant downtown, everyone talking about how this was the right decision and a new chapter. She'd barely touched her salmon. "You'll have so much freedom now," Sarah had said, reaching across the table to pat her hand. "No maintenance, no yard work, and the trust will make sure you're comfortable." Comfortable. As if comfort could be measured in square footage and monthly allowances. The trust, she'd later discovered, came with strings. Every expenditure over $100 needed approval. Medical expenses were covered, yes, but she had to use approved providers. Her old doctor of 30 years wasn't one of them. The new one barely looks at her during their quarterly visits, typing notes into his laptop about her age-related decline. Mary moves to her small desk, where a stack of unsent letters sits in a neat pile. She writes them every week, real letters, with pen and paper, like she'd been taught in school. They detail her days, her thoughts, her memories. Sometimes they're angry, sometimes pleading, sometimes just filled with the small observations that mothers once shared with their children over Sunday dinner. She never mails them. The last time she'd tried sending a letter, Sarah had called, the only call that year, to suggest that perhaps Mom was becoming too emotional and should talk to someone. They'd added a therapist to her approved provider list. She never went. The building's radiator kicks in with a clang, making her jump slightly. Outside, the November wind whistles through the gap in her window frame, a gap she's reported 3 times to maintenance. The super always promises to fix it next week. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had offered to help her caulk it, but Mary's pride